Every scar on my body has a story. The one along my left jaw came from a broken bottle in a bar that no longer exists. The one on my right palm is older, a knife I caught with my bare hand because I was 17 and stupid and trying to prove something to men who would forget my name before I finished bleeding. The ones across my ribs, 3 of them, parallel like lines on a music staff, came from a job that went wrong in a warehouse on the east side of a city I am no longer allowed to enter. I wear them the way other men wear their achievements. They are my resume, my introduction. My name is Peter Foster, and for the last 6 years I have been the most useful shadow the Underworld has ever employed. Not the most powerful, not the most feared. Those distinctions belong to someone else, someone I have spent 6 years carefully, desperately, lovingly avoiding. But useful, yes, that I have mastered. I am what the people in my world call a ghost, not because I am particularly quiet or particularly invisible, though I have learned both. I am called a ghost because I have done the one thing almost no one in our world manages to do cleanly. I disappeared. I walked away from a life that was supposed to be permanent, from a bond that was supposed to be unbreakable, from a man who was supposed to be mine, and I kept walking until the city swallowed me, and the new name I had chosen felt more real than the old one. Peter Foster. I chose it because it sounded forgettable, common, like the kind of man who fixes gutters and drives a sensible car, and has never once stood in a candlelit room and felt the gravity of another person pulling at something inside his chest, like the moon pulling at the tide. I chose it because the name I used to be, would never survive what came next. And what came next was 6 years of surviving anyway. I work as an informant now. It sounds glamorous when you say it quickly. It is not glamorous. It is long hours in cold cars, nursing terrible coffee, watching people who are far more dangerous than me make decisions that will ripple outward into other people's lives. It is careful conversations in loud bars, where the noise is the point. It is knowing exactly how much truth to offer, and exactly how much to keep folded away behind my teeth. My handler's name is Detective Rory Callum, and he is one of approximately 4 people on Earth who knows my real face and my real name and my real history, in that order of importance. Rory is a good man. He has a husband and a daughter, and a commute that he complains about with the commitment of someone who has elevated a minor inconvenience into an art form. He recruited me 3 years into my disappearance, when I was living in a single room above a laundromat and running courier jobs for people whose packages I had long since learned not to ask about. He found me because I am apparently not as invisible as I thought I was. He sat across from me in a diner that smelled like pancake syrup and something vaguely chemical from the kitchen, slid a photograph across the table, and said very quietly, "I know who you used to be." I looked at the photograph, then I looked at him. "I'm going to need to hear everything you know about the Hamilton organization," he said. And there it was. The name I had spent 3 years carefully not saying out loud, not even in the privacy of my own skull. Hamilton. Zach Hamilton. I picked up my coffee, set it down, picked it up again. "That's a dangerous subject," I said. "I know." Rory looked at me with the particular exhausted patience of a man who has been doing a difficult job for too long and has not yet decided whether to quit. "That's why I need someone who already knows the terrain." I thought about the laundromat, the single room, the courier jobs, the life I had built from nothing, piece by careful piece, in a city that did not know my face. I thought about the alternative. That was 3 years ago. In the time since, I have built a reputation in the underworld that is entirely separate from the one I left behind. Contacts who trust me because I have never burned them. Middlemen who use me to pass information sideways when they cannot afford to be seen talking to each other. A small but genuine network of people who know me as a reliable shadow. Someone who shows up, does the work, and disappears again. It is, if I am being brutally honest with myself, not so different from what I was trained to do. What I was shaped to do, over years of careful, loving, suffocating instruction. I was trained to observe, to listen, to understand the people around me, and know what they needed and give it to them before they had to ask. I was trained to be useful. The difference, and it is a difference that matters more than I can easily explain, is that now I choose what to do with those skills. Now the information flows out of me toward people who will use it to protect rather than to harm. Now when I sit in a cold car with terrible coffee and watch a dangerous man make a dangerous decision, I am not doing it for love. I am not doing it for love. I am absolutely, categorically not doing it for love. The job that changes everything begins on a Thursday, with Rory sliding a new photograph across a new table in a new diner that smells like the ghost of 1,000 previous breakfasts. Hamilton's expanding, Rory says, moving into new territory. We need an inside line. I study the photograph. It is a surveillance shot, grainy, taken from distance, but I would know that silhouette in total darkness. I would know it in a dream. I have in fact known it in several dreams over the past 6 years, and woken up with my heart beating like something trying to escape. Zach Hamilton. He is standing outside a building I do not recognize, hands in his coat pockets, head tilted slightly as he listens to the man beside him. He looks exactly the same. He looks nothing like I remembered. He is both of these things simultaneously, and the contradiction sits in my chest like a stone. How inside, I say. My voice comes out steady. I am very good at steady. We have an asset, Rory says. Junior level, logistics. They can get you into the supply chain documentation if you can get close enough to access the physical records. Where? Rory names a building, a location, a timeline. I turn the photograph face down on the table so I do not have to look at it. Fine, I say. I'll need a week to establish cover. Rory nods. He is looking at me with that particular careful expression he wears when he wants to ask something and has decided not to, which happens more often than he realizes, and which I appreciate more than I will ever say. Peter, he starts. A week, I repeat. I'll be in touch. I leave the photograph on the table, face down, and walk out into a morning that smells like rain and exhaust, and the specific particular misery of knowing that the universe has a very dark sense of humor. The cover I build takes 8 days, not 7. I become Marcus Cole, logistics consultant, newly relocated, looking to expand his professional network in the city. The kind of man who shows up at industry events and trade functions and asks the right questions in a tone that suggests competence without suggesting threat. The kind of man whose background check is clean because the people who built my background check are very, very good at their jobs. Marcus Cole has opinions about supply chain efficiency. He has recommendations to make. He has a business card with a number that actually rings. Peter Foster, meanwhile, has a cold that he is managing with substandard over-the-counter medication and the grim determination of someone who absolutely cannot afford to be sick right now. The first event I attend as Marcus Cole is a networking function in the kind of venue that has been converted from industrial space into something aspirationally sleek, all exposed brick and concealed lighting, and a bar where the drinks cost 3 times what they should. I am good at these events. I move through rooms like this, the way water moves through a landscape, following the available channels, finding the low places, settling where there is space. I talk to 6 people in the first hour. 3 of them are genuinely in logistics. One is a venture capitalist who gives me his card with the specific energy of someone handing out personal contact details to a stranger. 2 are connected, in various degrees of separation, to the Hamilton organization. I am on my 3rd drink, which I am barely touching, because I do not drink at work, because staying sharp is not a preference, but a survival strategy, when I become aware of a change in the room. It is not a dramatic thing, not a hush, not a turning of heads, not the parting of a crowd. It's subtler than that. It is the way the room's center of gravity shifts, the way certain conversations lose a thread, and certain eyes track toward the entrance. I do not turn immediately. I finish my sentence to the man I am talking to. I laugh at his response. I set my glass down on a passing tray with the unhurried ease of a man who has nowhere more important to be. Then I turn. Zach Hamilton is across the room. He is taller than the photograph suggested, which is not possible because photographs do not lie about scale, and yet somehow my memory has been lying to me for 6 years because he is taller. He is broader across the shoulders. He is wearing a dark suit that fits him with the particular precision of something custom-made, and he is standing the way he has always stood, with that stillness that is not passivity, but the opposite of it. The stillness of a man who has decided to be exactly where he is and intends to remain there until he is ready to move. His hair is shorter than I remember. There are new lines at the corners of his eyes. He is looking at the person speaking to him, head bent slightly in that listening posture, and he has not looked in my direction. I breathe. In through the nose, out through the mouth, even, measured, deliberate. My heart is doing something complicated that I do not have time to examine. I turn back to my conversation. The next 3 weeks are the most carefully choreographed of my professional life. As Marcus Cole, I attend 4 events. I cultivate 3 contacts within the extended orbit of the Hamilton organization. I access 2 sets of documents that Rory needs, passed through the junior asset with the precision of a very slow, very careful relay race. As Peter Foster, I wake up at 3 in the morning twice, once from a dream I cannot remember, and once from one I remember too clearly, and stare at the ceiling of my rented apartment until the feeling in my chest subsides to something manageable. I do not see Zach Hamilton up close. I am very precise about this. I know his schedule. It is part of the information I am gathering, and I arrange myself accordingly. Different sides of different rooms, different arrivals and departures. The same skills that made me useful to him 6 years ago now keep me safely away from him. It is, I think, on the morning of the 22nd day, a sustainable arrangement. I think this at 8:47 in the morning. At 9:15, my phone rings with a number I do not recognize, and a voice I would know in total darkness says, "Marcus Cole." It is not a question. I am very, very still. "Mr. Hamilton," I say, and my voice is perfect, level, mildly curious, the voice of a man who has been slightly expecting this call because he has been doing good work, and good work gets noticed. I wondered if we'd connect. A pause. Brief. 2 seconds, maybe 3. "Dinner," he says. "Tonight. I'll send the address." The line disconnects. I set the phone down on the kitchen table and look at my hands, which are very steady, and think about what a remarkable amount of effort I put into being a person who has good hands in a crisis, and how inconvenient that is right now. Because if my hands were shaking, I would have something external to point to, some physical evidence of the internal catastrophe that is currently happening behind my sternum. I call Rory. "He made contact," I say. A pause on his end. Then, "How?" "Don't know yet. He's invited me to dinner." Another pause, longer. "Peter, I know. If he's made you, he hasn't." I say it with more certainty than I feel. "If he had, he wouldn't invite me to dinner. He'd send someone to a different kind of meeting." This is true. This is the thing about Zach Hamilton that I know better than anyone, better than any surveillance team or intelligence file. He is precise. When he is pleased, he extends an invitation. When he is displeased, he does not. The dinner invitation means he is curious, not suspicious. Curious is manageable. "Be careful," Rory says. "Always," I say, and hang up, and sit with my hands flat on the kitchen table, and breathe the way I taught myself to breathe 6 years ago, when I learned that controlling the breath is the closest thing there is to controlling the rest. The restaurant is exactly the kind of place I would have expected. Quiet, expensive in a way that does not announce itself. The kind of establishment that has been in the same location for decades and has survived every shift in the neighborhood's character by being precisely, immovably itself. Booths with high backs that create the illusion of privacy. Lighting that is warm without being intimate. The maitre d' knows Zach's name and shows me to the booth without being asked where I am going. I am there first. I arrange to be there first. 3 minutes early, enough to be settled, not enough to seem eager. I am wearing a jacket I bought 2 weeks ago specifically because it fits the Marcus Cole profile. Expensive but not flashy, the wardrobe of a man who takes his work seriously and his personal presentation as a professional extension of that seriousness. I have a glass of water. I am looking at the menu. I am a man waiting for a business meeting, and this is all that I am. Zach arrives at exactly the reservation time. I look up from the menu with the specific tempo of a man whose attention is claimed by something more important than the soup selection, and I look at him, and he looks at me, and the look lasts perhaps a second and a half longer than professional courtesy requires. Something moves through his expression, too fast to name, gone before I can trace its edges. He slides into the seat across from me with the same fluid economy I remember. Like someone who decided long ago not to waste motion on anything that wasn't necessary. "Marcus," he says. "Mr. Hamilton." I extend my hand. He takes it. His grip is the same. His hand is the same. I release it the half-second before it becomes strange and pick up my water glass as an alibi. "Zach," he says. "We're past formality, I think. Your work has come up in several conversations in the last week. That's impressive for someone who's only been in the city a short time." I try to make myself useful quickly, I say. Time spent building to a good reputation is time spent not using it. The corner of his mouth moves. It is a very small movement. 6 years ago, I would have called it a smile. Now I file it under data. Useful, he says. That's an interesting word. A server appears. We order. The ritual of it, the wine, the first course, the small decisions that fill the opening of an evening, gives me 4 minutes of structured interaction to settle into, to find the rhythm of being Marcus Cole at this table, across from this man. Zach lets it settle too. He is not a man who rushes. What brings you to the city? He asks when the server has gone. Opportunity, I say, the kind that doesn't stay open very long. And what kind of opportunity are you looking for? I give him the answer I have prepared, the one that is true enough to be convincing and curated enough to be safe. Supply chain optimization, efficiency gaps in mid-level distribution networks, the particular kind of expertise that makes itself indispensable without making itself threatening. He listens the way he always listened, completely, without interrupting, with a quality of attention that is almost physical in its weight. You feel it on your skin, the sense of being genuinely observed by someone who is very good at it. You've been in this kind of work for a while, he says. Not a question. Long enough. You have good instincts for it, the people you've connected with, the choices you've made about who to approach and who to let approach you. Those aren't skills you learn quickly. I pick up my wine glass. I had good teachers. Something crosses his face again. Same thing as before, still too fast. Where are you from originally, he asks. And here is the moment. Here is the small, essential fork in the road, where one answer leads to one kind of evening, and a different answer leads to something else entirely. Elsewhere, I say, with the particular mild smile of a man who finds his own evasiveness gently amusing. I move around. I've been a lot of places. He looks at me. I look at him. The candle between us moves slightly, because somewhere in the restaurant, a door has opened and closed, and the resulting shift of air is so small as to be almost imperceptible, and yet the flame responds to it, bends, recovers. Elsewhere, he repeats, and there is something in the single word that I cannot quite decode, some inflection I am not certain I am reading correctly. Everywhere, eventually, I say, but right now here. The moment passes. Dinner continues. We talk about logistics, about the city, about a dozen things that matter and a dozen that don't. He is, as he has always been, genuinely interesting to talk to. The kind of man whose mind moves between subjects with a lateral ease that makes conversation feel like watching someone navigate familiar terrain with complete confidence. I spend 2 hours being Marcus Cole, and I am almost the whole time. Almost, except for the moments when he looks at me in that particular way, the one that is too long and too still, like a man who is trying to remember a word that is right at the edge of his recall. I do not sleep that night. This is not unusual. I have not been sleeping well for 3 weeks. I lie in the dark of my rented apartment and listen to the city doing what cities do at 4 in the morning, and I go through the dinner with the methodical precision of a man filing a professional report. He did not recognize me. The certainty of this is important, so I test it from several angles. He did not say anything that suggested recognition. He did not react to anything in a way that broke from the Marcus Cole framing. The moments that felt weighted, the pauses, the looks, those are consistent with Zach Hamilton finding someone interesting. He has always been a man who finds certain people interesting, who takes note of them, who extends invitations. He did not recognize me. I am different. I have been different for 6 years. My hair is different, shorter and a different color than the one I was born with. I have more weight on me, harder weight, the kind that comes from years of physical necessity, rather than the careful, supervised wellness that characterized my former life. The scars are new. The glasses, plain glass, no prescription, but they change the geometry of the face in subtle ways, are new. And the most important thing, I carry myself differently. I have been Peter Foster for long enough that he is not a performance anymore. He is the truth, and Eli, the name I was born with, is the ghost. He did not recognize me. I say this to the ceiling of my apartment, firmly, and go back to running the numbers on the documentation I recovered. And if the numbers blur slightly in front of my eyes at around 5 in the morning, it is because I am tired, not because anything else is happening. The second dinner happens 9 days later, then a third, a week after that. By the fourth, it has become a pattern, and patterns are their own kind of danger. Patterns create expectation. Expectation creates dependency. Dependency creates gaps in the professional distance that I have been maintaining with both hands. But Rory says the access is valuable. The information flowing through these dinners, the things Zach mentions, the names he uses, the shape of his thinking about the expansion, is more useful than anything the junior asset has been able to provide. Keep going, Rory says. This is working. I know, I say. I know it is working. That is in fact the problem. The fifth dinner is different. Not in any way I can immediately point to. The restaurant is the same. The table is the same. Zach is there before me for the first time, which is a small departure, and he is looking at something on his phone when I arrive, and he puts the phone away when I sit down, with a finality that suggests whatever was on it is now, for the duration of this evening, irrelevant. You grew up near water, he says, before we have ordered, before the ordinary prelude of the evening has had time to establish itself. I look at him. What? The way you navigate a room. People who grow up near water move differently. There's a quality to how they read a space, something about understanding things that are always shifting. He picks up his wine glass, which has been poured, I realize, before I arrived. I've been trying to figure out what it is about you that's familiar. That's the closest I've come. The restaurant is warm. I am cold. That's a very specific observation, I say. I tend to be specific. I didn't grow up near water, I say, which is the truth, and which is therefore safe. No? He looks at me, that look again, the measuring one. Somewhere specific, though, somewhere that left marks. Everywhere leaves marks, I say. He smiles. It is a real smile, not the small professional approximation that opens most of our conversations, and it hits me somewhere below the ribs in a way that I spend the next 6 seconds very carefully not reacting to. You're careful, he says. Professionally careful. There's a difference between someone who is naturally private and someone who has decided that privacy is a tool. You're the second kind. Is that a problem? My voice is very calm. No. He picks up the menu, though I suspect he is not reading it. It's interesting. We order, we eat, we talk about 3 things that I will later report to Rory, and 4 things that I will not, because they are not professionally relevant. Because they are the kind of conversation that 2 people have when they are sitting across from each other, not as categories, but as specific individuals, and those conversations are mine, the ones I keep. He tells me about a book he has been reading. He tells me his theory about the difference between strategy and instinct, and why most people who think they are operating on instinct are actually operating on strategy they have forgotten they learned. He asks me what I think matters, not professionally, just what I think matters. Getting through, I say, after a moment, to the other side of the difficult thing, whatever it is. He is quiet for a moment. And then what? Then you find the next difficult thing, I say, but you get to do it from the other side of the first one. He looks at me with something that is not the measuring look, and is not the professional attention, and is something else, something I have not been naming, because naming things makes them real, and some things I cannot afford to make real. Why did you leave, he says. The non sequitur, or what would be a non sequitur to Marcus Cole, lands in my chest like a dropped stone. Leave where, I say. Wherever you left. He tilts his head very slightly. You said you move around, but that's a choice, and choices have reasons. What were you getting to the other side of? I look at him across the candlelight and the white linen and the careful architecture of a restaurant that has hosted 1,000 conversations and will host 1,000 more. And I say, a life that wasn't mine. It is the most honest thing I have said in 6 years. He holds my gaze for a moment that is 3 seconds long, or 3 minutes long, or a duration that exists outside normal measurement. I see, he says, and something in the way he says it makes me think, for the first time with real force, that he might. It happens on a Monday. I am in a library, not a metaphor, an actual library, the old kind with high ceilings and wooden card catalogs that are still present as furniture, is no longer as function. I am using one of the reading tables because the light is good and the room is quiet, and I have a report to compile that requires the kind of concentration that my apartment, lately, has not been providing. I am reading through a set of financial records that the junior asset passed last week, cross-referencing against a set of corporate filings that Rory obtained through official channels, building the architecture of a case that will eventually matter to someone other than me. My phone vibrates. An unknown number. Marcus, I say, nothing on the other end. Silence, but not the silence of a dropped call. The silence of someone who is there, who is listening, who has something to say and has not yet decided how. I know, Zach says, finally. 2 words. The library is very quiet. Somewhere above me, a heating system does something routine and mechanical. Outside the tall windows, a city continues to exist. What do you know? My voice is perfect. It is the best voice I have ever used. A flawless performance by a man who has spent 6 years preparing for a performance he was hoping never to give. I know that Marcus Cole was created 18 months ago, Zach says. I know that before Marcus Cole, there was a person who moved through 6 cities in 3 years in ways that left very specific traces. And before that, he stops. Before that, he says, and his voice is different now. The professional precision sanded back to something raw underneath. There was someone I lost. The heating system cycles off. The library is absolutely silent. Zach, I say. Not Marcus Cole, not the performance, just me, just my voice and his name. A sound on the other end of the line. Not a word, just air. Meet me, he says. That's not his business, not as Marcus Cole and Zach Hamilton, just. Another pause, and in the pause I can hear something that I haven't heard from him in 6 years. Something that the professional shell and the reputation and the weight of everything he has become were not quite thick enough to muffle. Please. 6 years. I have not heard him say please in 6 years. I look at the financial records spread across the library table, and I think about Rory, and I think about the report, and I think about all of the very good professional reasons why meeting Zach Hamilton outside a structured, monitored context is a significant operational risk. Then I think about 2 words. I know. Where, I say. He sends an address. It is not a restaurant or an office building or any of the kinds of spaces where Zach Hamilton conducts his professional life. It is an apartment, a real one, high floor, the kind of place a person actually lives rather than the kind of place a person uses to signal things about themselves. I tell Rory I am meeting a contact. I give him the address. I tell him it is routine, which is a lie, and he probably knows it is a lie, but he has, over 3 years, learned to trust my judgment in the field in the way that you trust a knife you have used many times. Not because it cannot cut you, but because you have learned to handle it carefully. The building's elevator opens into a hallway, one door at the end. I stand in front of it for a moment that is longer than it needs to be, and then I knock. The door opens. Zach Hamilton is standing in his own apartment, in a shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbows, and he looks at me across the threshold, and neither of us says anything for a moment. Then he steps back, and I walk in. The apartment is, I take it in without appearing to take it in, the old habit, the training, lived in, books, an actual mess on the coffee table, which surprises me. He was always meticulous, a jacket thrown over the back of a chair, the kind of disorder that comes not from carelessness, but from being, lately, preoccupied with something else. He closes the door. I stand in the middle of his living room, and wait. Eli, he says. It is the first time anyone has said that name in 6 years. It hits me in the sternum, like a physical thing. Peter, I say. That's my name now. Peter. He says it with a quality I cannot immediately decode, like he is trying it on, like he is looking at it from different angles. 6 years ago, when I left. When you disappeared, he says. There is something in it that is not an accusation, and is not an accusation. Yes. He moves to the kitchen, which is open to the living room, and I think he is getting something to drink. And I am right. 2 glasses, water, he fills them both at the sink, and sets one on the counter nearest me, without crossing the room to hand it to me, which is, I think, a deliberate spatial choice. I move to the counter and pick up the glass. We are 6 feet apart. How long have you known, I ask, that Marcus Cole wasn't real? 3 weeks. He looks at his own glass. That Marcus Cole was you? Tonight. What told you? He is quiet for a moment. Then, you said something at dinner, about getting through to the other side of the difficult thing. He looks up. You said that to me once, years ago. I remember. I remember when I said it and why and what it felt like to say it. And I have carried the memory of saying it without letting myself think about the memory of saying it, which is the kind of impossible balancing act that you eventually just learn to sustain. I didn't think you'd remember, I say. I remember everything you ever said to me, he says, simply, without performance. The 6 feet between us is not very much space. Zach, why? And there it is, the question I have been carrying the answer to for 6 years. The one that I have rehearsed in 17 different versions, and none of them are right. Peter, why did you leave? I set down the water glass. Because I was afraid, I say, of what staying would cost me, of what it was already costing me. His jaw tightens. I would never have. Not you, I say quickly, because I need him to understand this, and I need him to understand it correctly. Not you. The life, the structure of it, the way it worked, the way everything flowed toward you and through you and the people around you existed to serve that. And I was so far inside it that I couldn't see it anymore. Couldn't see where you ended and the role ended and where I was supposed to begin. He is very still. I loved you, I say. I loved you completely, and I was so afraid that loving you completely was going to erase me entirely that I ran. The silence that follows is the loudest silence I have ever been inside. And now, he says, finally, now I'm Peter Foster. I say, I'm a person. I have a life that I built with my own hands from nothing. I make my own choices. I go my own directions. I look at him across the 6 feet and the 6 years, and I would very much like to stay that person. Something moves through his expression, a great deal of things actually, moving too fast to track, like weather over open water. I would never ask you to be anything else, he says. You wouldn't mean to. No, he meets this honestly. He always was honest, even when the honesty was difficult. But you're right that I didn't, that I wasn't. He stops, starts again. I didn't see it, what you were losing. I thought, his voice changes register slightly. I thought you were happy. I was, I say. That was the problem. I was happy in a way that was making me smaller and smaller, and I was so happy that I almost didn't notice. He turns away. Not in anger. I know his anger, and this is not it. In the way a person turns away when they need a moment to contain something too large for the ordinary dimensions of a face. I watch the line of his shoulders. I looked for you, he says, to the window, to the city outside it. For a year, I looked for you. I know. Rory told me years later, when I first became his asset. The Hamilton Network had been asking questions. Questions that eventually went quiet. I'm sorry. Don't apologize for surviving. He turns back. His face is, there is something on it that I do not have a professional word for, and don't need one. I'm not angry. I was, for a long time I was, but I'm not. He stops. You're here. You're in front of me. I don't have room for anything else right now. 6 feet. I close 2 of them before I realize I am moving, and then I stop, because I should stop, because there are 100 things I have not said, and he has not said, and the space between us is full of them. I'm an informant, I say, for law enforcement. The work I've been doing here. I know, he says. You know? I've known for 2 days. His expression is complicated and does not simplify. I had a conversation with someone, got some information, verified it. He looks at me steadily. The documentation you recovered, the supply chain records, they went to an investigation. The implications of this settle around me slowly, like snow. No. Quiet. Absolute. No. I'm not going to do anything. Something shifts in his face, something that is the nearest I have seen to uncertainty in a man who is professionally not uncertain. I think some things in my operation needed to be looked at. I think there have been things I didn't, things I let happen because of who I am in that world, and what the expectations are. He exhales. I'm not the villain you were working against, Peter, but I haven't always been careful about what grows in the shadow of what I am. This is, possibly, the most honest thing I have ever heard him say. What happens now, I ask. He looks at me for a long time. I don't know, he says, and the admission of it, from a man who has spent 15 years knowing exactly what happens next in every situation, lands between us like something very fragile and very real. What do you want to happen? I am standing 4 feet from Zach Hamilton in his apartment, 6 years from the person I used to be, and the question is so simple and so enormous that for a moment I cannot hold it. What do I want? Peter Foster, my name, my choices, my life, the one I built, the one that is mine. The man in front of me who looked for me for a year and has spent 3 years across various tables from a stranger and didn't know why the stranger felt familiar, and then did know and called and said please. I want them to be compatible, I say. The things I am now, who I've become, and, whatever this is, I need them to be compatible. He nods slowly. I can work with that, he says. Zach, I take the last 2 feet. I am standing close enough now that I can see the detail of him, the fine lines, the gray at his temples that wasn't there 6 years ago, the way he is looking at me like I am something he had stopped allowing himself to expect. The work I was doing here, I'm going to have to continue working with Rory. That doesn't change. I know. And there are things about my operation that you're not going to know about, information I can't share. I understand. He does. He would. And I won't be what I was before, I say. I can't be. That person is gone. I know that too. His voice is very quiet. I didn't fall. He stops, corrects. I'm not standing here because I want what we had. I'm standing here because I found out that the most interesting person I've met in 6 years is someone I already knew, and the combination of both of those things is. He searches for the word. Terrifying, I offer. Yes, he says, exactly that. I look at him. He looks at me. Hello, I say. My name is Peter. And Zach Hamilton, the most dangerous man in 3 cities worth of Underworld, does something I have never once, in all my cataloging of his expressions and reactions and the precise language of his face, seen him do in front of another person. It is sudden and genuine and slightly undignified, and it transforms his face into something that has nothing to do with reputation or power or any of the categories that define him in the world outside this room. Zach, he says, when the laugh is settled, it's very good to meet you, Peter. The next several weeks are the strangest of my life, and I say that as someone whose life has been, by most objective measures, quite strange. I continue working. The information pipeline to Rory does not close. We have simply shifted its parameters, and Rory, who asks me exactly one pointed question about my changed circumstances, and then, receiving my answer, nods and says be careful, and means it in a new and different way, adjusts accordingly. Zach, for his part, begins quietly, without announcement, making changes to the edges of his operation. The things that grew in the shadow of what he is. He does not tell me about them, and I do not ask, because that is not how this works. But I can see them. The way you can see the evidence of weather in the aftermath, even when you missed the storm itself. We have dinner. We take different routes to the same restaurant, and we sit across from each other, and we talk. We talk differently than we talked to Zach Hamilton and Marcus Cole, and differently than we talked 6 years ago, and differently than I think either of us entirely expected. He does not treat me like something he lost and recovered. He treats me like someone new, which I am, while also clearly being someone who knew me before, which he is, and the double exposure of it should be disorienting, but is instead something I do not have a word for, not quite. Like recognition, but active. Like choosing to recognize, over and over. He asks me questions about my life, where I went, in the 3 years before Rory found me, what I learned, what I like now that I didn't before. I tell him about the 6 cities and the various jobs, and the single room above the laundromat. I tell him about Rory, enough that he understands the shape of it without the operational detail. I tell him about the scars. He listens. He always listened, but there's a quality to it now that is different from the listening I remember. Less proprietary somehow, less arranged around a central fixed point. He has changed too. 6 years will do that. 15 years of building and maintaining what he is will do it further. There are things he carries that he does not explain, and that I do not press for. Things that have made him careful in new ways. We are, in short, strangers who know each other, learning the specific shape of a new thing. It is, if I am honest, the most interesting thing that has ever happened to me. About a month in, we are walking. This happens sometimes. Dinner ends and the city is doing something particular with its light, and neither of us is ready to separate back into our respective lives, so we walk. I have learned that Zach walks the way he does everything, with direction, even when the direction is not specifically toward anything. We are on a bridge over the river, the kind of bridge that is purely functional in the daytime and becomes something else in the dark, the water below reflecting the lights of the city in long broken lines. I was going to retire, he says. I look at him. From everything, he says it to the river. Before I recognized you, I had been thinking for a while about what it would mean to step back, build an exit strategy. He pauses. The life I built is not a life that ends well usually. I know that. He looks at me, sideways. Nothing stopped me. I was still thinking about it. What changed? A pause. The river moves below us. The city breathes. The possibility of something specific to step toward, he says, not just away from. I am quiet for a moment, looking at the water. That's a lot of weight to put on a person, I say. I know. He turns to look at me directly. I'm not saying this is the reason, or that you're obligated to anything because of it. I'm saying that I had already been thinking about the exit, and you are. He stops, exhales slowly. You are an additional argument in a direction I was already going. I look at him. He is looking at me with an expression that is stripped down to the essential, without the professional architecture around it. An expression that I spent years being the recipient of, and more years not allowing myself to miss, and have been, these past weeks, cataloging in a new context. Zach, I say, you don't have to. I'm not running, I say. I need you to know that. I'm not. I'm standing here, on this bridge, of my own choosing, and I am not running. Something in his posture shifts, releases. Okay, he says, but I need you to understand what I'm saying when I say I need us to be something different than we were, I continue. I'm not asking you to be different, I'm asking, I need the structure of it to be different. The way the space is arranged between us. What does that look like? Not defensive, genuinely asking. I maintain my work, my professional life, my relationships with the people I work with, including Rory, including anyone else. I meet his gaze steadily. I am not a kept thing. I am not a protected thing. I am not something you arrange the world around. You never were, he says, and then after a moment, but I see why it felt that way. I need that acknowledgement, I say. I know it doesn't change the past, but I need it. You have it. He says it without hesitation, without the faint defensive quality that I was braced for, that I was ready to navigate around. He simply says it and means it, and the simplicity of it knocks something loose in my chest. And anything else you need, tell me. I might need to tell you to give me space, I say, and when I do, I need you to give it without interpreting it as a warning sign. Yes, and I might not always be available. The work takes what it takes. I know what that's like, he says, mildly. Right. The faintest pull at the corner of my mouth. Yes, you do. We are quiet for a moment. The river, the bridge, the city insisting on its own continuity around us. What do you need from me? I ask. He is quiet for a moment. A genuine moment, not a calculated pause, but the real thing. Someone actually thinking, actually looking for the true answer rather than the good answer. Honesty, he says, the kind you've been giving me tonight. The kind where you tell me the difficult thing instead of navigating around it. I can do that. And, he stops. What? Time, he says finally. Just time. To learn who you are now. To let you learn who I am. Without the old shape of things pressing down on us. He looks at the river again. I would like the opportunity to get this right, Peter. If you're willing to give that. I look at him, at the profile of him. The jaw and the brow and the quiet, exhausted, honest expression of a man who has spent 15 years being very dangerous, and has tonight set it entirely aside. I think about 6 years. About the room above the laundromat. About the scars. About Rory and the terrible coffee and the cold cars and the work I chose and the name I chose and the person I became by sheer insistence, by deciding to be someone and then being them until it was true. I think about what it would mean to add something to that, not to replace it, not to return to an old shape, but to add, to let something grow in the space I have made, in the life that is genuinely mine. I'm here, I say, on this bridge, of my own choosing. He looks at me. Yeah, he says quietly, you are. There are things that happen slowly. Trust, for instance, when it has been interrupted by 6 years of silence and a significant professional conflict of interest. Trust builds slowly. Not because either of us is unwilling, but because we are both, in our respective ways, careful people. And careful people do not rush the architecture of something important. Zach meets Rory. This is my idea, and Rory's expression, when I suggest it, passes through approximately 6 distinct stages in under 3 seconds. He lands eventually on the particular expression of a man who has decided to trust someone else's judgment in a situation where his own judgment says, this is a terrible idea. You're sure, Rory says. I'm sure that it's the right next step, I say. Not sure it'll go perfectly. Peter. He's not going to compromise the investigation, I say. He's already begun, quietly, to address some of what the investigation has found. He's stepping back from the operation. I pause. He's not going to be what he was. Rory looks at me for a long time with the expression of a man who has, over 3 years, become something adjacent to a friend. The closest thing I have to a person who knows both the Peter Foster self and the ghost beneath it. You love him, Rory says. I do not answer immediately. That's complicated, I say. Love is always complicated, Rory says, with the serene practicality of a married man who has earned the right to say it. That doesn't answer my question. I don't know yet, I say, which is the honest answer. I know that what I felt before was real, and I know that what I'm feeling now is different and also real, and I don't know what word it is. Fair enough. Rory closes his notebook. Set up the meeting. The meeting is at a coffee shop, neutral ground, somewhere that is not a restaurant with history, and not a police building, and not an apartment that belongs to anyone. Rory and Zach regard each other across a small table, with the specific wary mutual assessment of two very capable people who are each trying to determine exactly how much of a problem the other represents. I sit between them and drink my coffee and watch. You know what he does, Zach says, meaning me. Yes, Rory says, and you know that you two have history. Yes. Rory's expression is carefully neutral. I've known for a while. Zach looks at me. You told him? Not in detail, I say. He figured out the relevant shape of it. He's perceptive, Zach says, to no one in particular. Alarmingly so, I agree. Something happens then. Zach's mouth moves in the particular way, the small restrained something that I have been cataloging, and Rory catches it, and looks at me and catches something on my face before I can smooth it, and his expression shifts by a millimeter, in the direction of a man suppressing a smile. So, Rory says, looking back at Zach with a certain precision, you're stepping back from the operation. Over the next 18 months, Zach says, systematically, not in a way that creates a vacuum, that would cause more problems than it solves, carefully. And the things that needed to be addressed are being addressed. A pause. Not because I was caught, because they needed to be. Rory looks at him for a long moment. Rory has, in 3 years, gotten very good at looking at people and letting the silence ask the question. I know what you're asking, Zach says. You're asking whether you can trust the answer. Can I? Zach looks at me briefly, then back at Rory. I don't know, he says. You can evaluate the evidence over time. That's the only honest answer I can give you. Rory nods slowly, once, in the manner of a man filing information for future reference. All right, he says. This conversation didn't happen. Agreed, Zach says. The three of us sit with our coffees. The coffee shop makes coffee shop sounds around us, the specific domestic background noise of an ordinary morning in an ordinary city. He said you're annoyingly perceptive, I say to Rory. He said alarmingly, Rory says. That's better, I say. Zach looks between us with the expression of a man who is adding data points to a file. And the data points are telling him something that, from the slight shift of his expression, he finds something he is not entirely sure what to do with yet. 4 months in, on a night in the middle of a week in the middle of a season, Zach is at my apartment. This has become ordinary, not every day, not in the arranged, expected way of things that have a structure built around them. Just, sometimes when the work is done and the evening has room in it, he comes. Brings food or doesn't. Reads or talks or sits in the specific comfortable silence of someone who has learned that they do not have to fill the space between two people with words. We are on the couch. He is reading something on his phone that he has declared professionally non-urgent, but has not yet put down. I am reading an actual book, the kind made of paper, because I like the physical object of it, the specific weight and texture. It is entirely ordinary. I look up from the page. He is not reading anymore. He is watching me. Not the measuring look, not the professional attention, not any of the cataloged expressions I have accumulated over months of dinners and walks and careful conversations. Just watching. The way you watch something you are fond of and have, gradually, stopped pretending not to be. What, I say. Nothing, he says. I was just nothing. I look back at my book. I love you, he says. I turn the page. Then I set the book down on my knee, finger marking the place. I know, I say. Okay. He goes back to his phone. I go back to my book. Approximately 2 pages later, I say, I love you too. I know, he says. Okay, I say. The evening continues. The city continues. Outside my apartment, the world is doing what the world does, the vast, complicated machinery of it. And, inside my apartment, there is a couch and 2 people and a comfortable silence. And somewhere underneath it, the great still bedrock fact of a thing that has survived improbably and arrived changed and sits between us now, not as a history, but as a present tense. Let me tell you the shape of it. Not the romantic version, the one where love transforms everything instantly, and the problems dissolve, and the difficult history becomes a quaint preamble to an uncomplicated future. That is not the shape. The real shape is this. Zach Hamilton spends 18 months systematically stepping back from the operation he has spent 15 years building. He does it carefully, as he said he would, with the methodical intelligence he brings to everything, and in doing so he does what almost no one in his world manages to do. He gets out. Not cleanly, there's no clean exit from a life built the way his was built, but out, in the sense that matters, in the sense that the direction of travel is consistently away and the distance accumulates. He opens a consulting firm. This is almost funny, and we both know it is almost funny. And the almost funniness of it becomes a small private language between us that I treasure in a way that would be embarrassing to explain to anyone else. He is very good at consulting, as it turns out. He is very good at looking at complicated organizational problems and seeing the architecture of them, the places where the structure is generating its own friction, and identifying what needs to change. He has, after all, spent 15 years running a very complex organization. He is also, it turns out, very good at being known as someone who is very good at things, for acceptable reasons. He finds this slightly absurd. I find his slight absurdity charming in a way I tell him about regularly, because I have learned in the years since A Bridge in the Dark and a conversation that cost us both something and gave back more, to say the things instead of keeping them. I continue working with Rory for another year. Then Rory retires. His daughter is 7 and his husband has been patient, and the commute, he says with great feeling, is finally going to kill him if he doesn't address it. And the investigation reaches its conclusions, and my role in it transitions from active asset to occasional consultant. I take the time this creates and do something I have been thinking about for a long time. I start writing. Not reports, not professional documentation. I start writing the actual story, my story, the years of it, the 6 cities and the laundromat room, and the carefully chosen name, and the scars, and the library with the high ceilings, and the bridge, and the candles at dinner. And the morning I stood in front of an apartment door for longer than I needed to and knocked. I don't know what I'll do with it. Maybe nothing. Maybe it's just for me, the way a lot of things are just for me, the internal rooms that are mine to keep. Zach reads some of it, the parts I show him, and sits quietly afterward in the way he sits quietly when something has gotten past the professional shell and reached the part of him that doesn't have a professional shell. It's good, he says. You're biased, I say. Catastrophically, he agrees. It's still good. I am 34 years old. I have 3 scars with origin stories, and 2 that I got in ways boring enough that I have never developed a good narrative for them. I have a name that I chose, and a life that I built, and a city that I have lived in long enough that I know which coffee shops play music too loud, and which ones have the good chairs, and which ones Rory still meets me in on the first Thursday of every month, even though he is retired, and the meeting is no longer professional, and has become instead just 2 people eating eggs and complaining about the things they find worth complaining about. I have an apartment that has gradually, over time, acquired the evidence of 2 people inhabiting it. Not because anyone made a declaration, but because time and proximity, and the ordinary accumulation of someone else's books on your shelves, and someone else's coffee in your cabinet, eventually becomes the fact of cohabitation whether or not you name it. I have named it. We both have. Last month, on an evening that was not significant by any external measure, Zach said, "This is the best thing in my life." And I said, "Yes." And he said, "I'm sorry it took losing it to understand that." And I said, "I'm sorry I felt I had to leave instead of saying what I needed." And we sat with those truths, the way you sit with truths that are too large for resolution, but too real to file away. And eventually he made tea, because he has learned that I like tea in the evenings, and he has started keeping the kind I like. And I moved to where he was and leaned into the side of him, into the warmth of him, into the specific gravity that has always existed between us, and that I spent 6 years running from, and am done running from. "Hello," I said, into his shoulder. "Hello," he said, into my hair. Not the same greeting as the bridge. Not the same as the library, or the restaurant, or the apartment threshold, or any of the specific moments that I have, apparently, decided to organize my life around. A new one, the daily version. The one that means I am here, of my own choosing, and the choosing is the point. They used to call him the most dangerous man in 3 cities. I know what that means and what it doesn't mean. I know the weight of it, the years of decisions and consequences that built it, the reputation that was as much armor as advertisement. He put it down. Not in a single dramatic moment, not in a speech, not in any way that would make a good scene in a version of this story that prioritized the cinematic. He put it down the way you put down something heavy that you have been carrying for so long you forgot it was a choice to carry it. Gradually, and then not. The dangerous man is, these days, the man who keeps my tea in stock and reads complicated organizational theory for fun and has a consulting firm that is, genuinely, very successful, and who has a smile, not the professional approximation, the real one, the undignified one, that appears more often now than it used to. The dangerous man is the man who sat across from me in a restaurant and didn't know why I felt familiar, and then did know, and called, and said please. He stopped being the most dangerous man in the underworld the day he found out I was his informant. He stopped being dangerous in the way that matters, the way that leaves wreckage, the day he chose, very deliberately, to try something else, to try this. I write this on a morning that is cool and quiet, sitting at the desk by the window that looks out over the city, with tea that is the right temperature, and a pen that has enough ink, and the sounds of Zach in the other room, doing whatever he does on weekend mornings when the consulting firm is closed and the world has, by mutual agreement, been set temporarily aside. I write this as Peter Foster, who is a real person who has a real life, who loves someone and is loved by someone, and keeps both of those facts in the part of himself that is for keeping, for safeguarding, for returning to when the work is hard, or the night is long, or the old habits try to reestablish themselves. I was a ghost for 6 years. I was very good at being a ghost. I am done with that particular skill. The scars are still there, every one of them. They are mine. They tell the story of a person who went through difficult things and came through the other side, and kept going, and found that on the other side of the second difficult thing, and the third, and the fourth, there was eventually a morning like this one, cool and quiet. The sounds of a familiar voice from the other room. I told Zach once that when I run into him, I feel like the moon being pulled by the tide. He corrected me. You mixed it up, he said. It's the tide pulled by the moon. I know, I said. I did it on purpose. He thought about it, then slowly, because you're the one doing the pulling. Because I'm the one doing the choosing, I said. He was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled, the real one. Yeah, he said. Okay, yeah. My name is Peter Foster. I chose it because it sounded forgettable, and it turned out not to be. I am a person who makes his own choices, and this, all of this, the work and the name and the life, and the scars and the tea and the man in the other room, and the morning light coming through the window, and the fact that I am here, writing this, which is a thing I chose to do with a morning that is mine, this is the choice I am most glad I made, not the leaving. The leaving was fear, and I have more compassion for the person I was than I once did, but fear is not a choice I would celebrate. The arriving, the staying, the standing on a bridge in the dark and saying, I am here, of my own choosing. That one. That is the choice. If you made it to the end, you're my kind of person. Leave a subscribe, comment down your favorite part of the story, and if you want early access to videos, exclusive content, or just want to support the channel, hit that join button right below the video. Even one member genuinely means the world to me.